It started with a whisper in my own kitchen. My son-in-law measuring the window frames, talking about potential. He thought I couldn't hear from the porch, but I've spent a lifetime catching nails before they fall. That day I realized I'd built every corner of this house for love, and they were about to rent it by the night. Before we continue, make sure to hit the like button. Also, tell us in the comments, what time is it where you are right now and which city are you watching from? I love seeing how far our stories travel. The afternoon light was bleeding orange through the lace curtains when I heard him say it. His voice had that tight, calculating rhythm people get when they're talking about something that doesn't belong to them yet. He was explaining to my daughter how the living room could be opened up. Just take down that half wall, make it more open concept. I stayed quiet. The smell of cedar and lemon oil hung in the air. That's the scent of a house that's lived, not staged. The same house I built with my own hands 50 years ago. Before arthritis stiffened them, before my wife's laughter stopped echoing down the hallway. I heard my daughter laugh nervously, that small, uncertain sound she uses when she doesn't agree but doesn't want to argue. She said, "Dad loves this place. You know how he gets about the porch." He replied, "Yeah, but it's wasted space. We could turn it into an outdoor lounge area. Good photo backdrop." I almost smiled at that. Photo backdrop. They were already seeing my porch through the lens of someone else's camera, a place for strangers, not family. The floorboard under my boot groaned, so I shifted my weight, slow as breath. He kept talking, numbers this time. Between the lake view and the wood shop out back, we could easily pull $250 a night, even more in the summer. That was when my heart slowed, not broke, just steadied. Because I understood the kind of greed I was dealing with. Not loud, not evil, just quiet and reasonable. The kind that wears family dinners like camouflage. They stopped talking when I came in. My daughter smiled too wide. "Hey, Dad, you hungry?" I nodded and sat down, every bone in my back suddenly aware of its age. The table was set for 3, not 4. The empty space where my wife used to sit felt heavier than ever. Dinner was awkward, too polite, too cheerful. He asked about my plans for the future in the same tone a banker asks about repayment schedules. I said, "Future's right here. Got enough repairs to last me till spring." He smiled, that salesman's smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "Well, you should think about simplifying, Grant. Maybe less maintenance, less worry. You deserve to rest." Rest. That word landed like a nail through dry wood. Rest means move aside. Rest means we're ready to take what you've built. After they left, I sat in my old workshop with the radio humming low. Static. Weather report. A tune from the 70s fading in and out. My tools hung on the wall, shadows long and loyal. The smell of sawdust still clung to everything. I picked up an unfinished piece of oak, rubbed my thumb along the grain. Strong, straight, dependable. That night I didn't sleep. The house made its usual sounds, wood settling, pipes sighing, but beneath it was a new rhythm. The rhythm of counting. My son-in-law was counting profits. I was counting exits. At dawn, I made coffee strong enough to scrape the rust off memory. Through the kitchen window, the lake was calm, still like it was holding its breath. A line of geese crossed the sky in silence. My wife used to say that kind of morning meant a change was coming. I took her photograph down from the shelf, the one with her hair caught in sunlight. I said quietly, "They think they're clever, love, but I taught them what a hammer's for." That day I started taking inventory, not of things but of control. The deed was still in my name. No joint ownership, no transfer. I kept it that way all these years, not out of mistrust, but habit. A man who builds knows the value of keeping his foundation under his own feet. I opened the old filing cabinet in my workshop. Blue folder, white label, title and insurance. My handwriting from 1981 still neat, stubborn as ever. Inside, the original deed, the survey, the mortgage release letter. I ran my finger along the embossed seal. Still mine, every square foot. I poured another cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table staring out at the lake. I thought about how easy it would be for them to justify it. We're helping Dad. We're modernizing the property. He'll still have his room. That's how betrayal dresses itself, in concern. By noon, I'd made up my mind. If they were planning a business with my house, I'd start my own. Not for money, for freedom. I grabbed my coat, locked the door behind me, and drove into town. Ruth's office was still there, little green building on Main Street with a crooked for sale sign hanging in the window. She looked up when I walked in, same sharp eyes, same quick smile. "Grant Mason," she said. "Haven't seen you in a decade." "Still breathing," I said. "You still selling hope to the highest bidder?" "Only the honest kind," she replied, tilting her head. "What can I do for you?" I paused long enough to feel the weight of what I was about to say. "Need to sell my place, quietly, fast." She leaned back. "That house by the lake? You serious?" "Serious as rot in a beam," I said. We talked numbers, timeline, paperwork. She promised discretion. I left with a handshake and a thin envelope, listing agreement blank for now. The wind picked up as I stepped outside, carrying the smell of rain and cedar. Driving home, the gravel popped under my tires like small decisions being made. Pulled into the driveway, looked up at the porch at the house that had held half a century of Sundays. Inside, I could still hear their laughter from yesterday echoing off the walls. I ran my hand along the doorframe, a groove from years of keys missing the lock. My wife's touch was still in the paint. I whispered, "Don't worry, I'll get you somewhere safe." That night I sat by the window with the lights off, watching the lake's reflection shimmer across the ceiling. For the first time in a long while I felt steady, because a plan was forming, slow, careful, like carpentry. Measure twice, cut once. By the time the moon rose, I already knew what came next. I wasn't going to fight them. I was going to vanish before they even realized the battle had begun. By the next morning, the rain had moved in from the west. You could smell the ocean in it, that mix of salt and metal and distance that tells you something's changing, even if you don't know what yet. The boards on the porch glistened, darker than usual, like the house itself was soaking in what I'd decided to do. I sat with my coffee, watching water drip through the eaves I kept promising to fix. There's comfort in routine even when you know you're about to break it. The old radio on the counter hummed out a country tune full of steel guitar and soft regret. That kind of sound can make a man honest with himself. I thought about my daughter, about how she'd grown up in these rooms. First steps down the hallway, first heartbreak on this very porch. She'd always been the careful one, the mediator between her mother's fire and my silence. Somewhere along the way, she learned to bend so far she started mistaking bending for peace. And then there was him. The man she married. I'll admit, at first I thought he might do right by her. He's smart, knows how to talk to people, dresses like the kind of man who's never had grease under his nails, but a man who's never broken a sweat building something real. Well, he doesn't understand the kind of love that lives inside old wood. By noon, I heard their car pull up again. Tires crunching wet gravel. I stayed seated, mug in hand, pretending to read the paper. The door opened without a knock. That's how I knew they'd already started thinking of the place as theirs. My daughter called out, "Dad, you up?" "Always," I said, folding the paper. "Coffee's hot." She smiled, too bright again. He followed her in, holding his phone out like a trophy. Grant, I've been running some numbers, he said. You know, if we rented your guest room and maybe the shop out back, we could cover your taxes and have a little extra for you every month. I took a sip of coffee, slow enough to stretch the silence. For me, I repeated like the words were a tool I needed to examine for cracks. Exactly, he said. It's passive income. You wouldn't have to do anything. That's the modern promise. Get something for nothing, build nothing, and still own everything. My wife used to say you can always spot a liar by how easy they make life sound. I'll think about it, I said. That was all they needed to hear. My daughter exhaled, relieved. He grinned like a man who'd already drawn up the blueprint. They stayed for lunch. Tomato soup, grilled cheese, the same meal I'd made her as a kid. Halfway through, my daughter started talking about options for downsizing, how there was a nice retirement place near town, how it wasn't really a nursing home, more like independent living. I watched the way her spoon kept circling the bowl, how she couldn't quite look me in the eye. Guilt has its own rhythm. When they left, I washed the dishes by hand. I've got a dishwasher, but there's something about hot water and soap that clears the head. Each plate felt heavier than it should, as if carrying years of Sunday dinners, birthdays, and arguments that never really ended. By evening, the house was quiet again. The kind of quiet that doesn't comfort. It presses down. I went into the den and sat in my wife's old rocker. The chair still groaned the same way it did when she'd read on winter nights, wool blanket across her knees, the faint smell of cinnamon tea around her. The room still carried her spirit even after a decade. I could almost hear her voice saying, "Don't get mad, Grant. Build something better." She was right about most things. I looked toward the dining table. That fourth chair sitting empty. No one ever took it since she passed. People always avoided it, even guests, like the air there was still claimed. That chair was a reminder that you can lose everything and still have to sit down to eat. That night I picked up the phone and called Ruth. She answered on the second ring. "Grant, that was quick," she said. "You still got that off-market buyer list?" "I do. You sure about this?" "Sure as nails in a beam," I said. "I'll bring the papers tomorrow." The next day the rain was gone, leaving behind that crisp chill that wakes the skin. I drove into town again, the old truck rattling like a companion that's seen too much but won't give up. The wipers squeaked every third pass. Another reminder of things I never quite fixed. Ruth's office smelled like fresh paint and coffee. She slid the contract across the desk, pen poised. "You can still change your mind," she said. I looked at her, then at the window where the sunlight caught dust in motion. "If I don't do this now, someone else will do it for me." My signature came out slow, deliberate. Not shaky, deliberate. Years of precision make that kind of difference. Each letter pressed into the paper like carving grain. She nodded. "I'll start the calls. Give me a few days." Driving back, the lake shimmered like glass. The trees along the bank were starting to turn red and gold, edging the green. Seasons don't ask permission to change. They just do. When I got home, my daughter had left a voicemail. "Hey, Dad. We thought maybe next week we could come by and measure the back deck. Just ideas, no pressure." Ideas. There's always pressure hiding under that word. I didn't call back. I sat on the porch until the sky went purple and the first stars showed through. I thought about the years it took to build a home that breathes like a living thing. How many storms it's seen, how many winters it's endured without asking for much in return. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of pine and rain-soaked soil. Somewhere across the water a loon cried, long, low, mournful. I felt it in my chest. I whispered to the night, "You held her laughter, you held our fights. You don't deserve to be rented by the weekend." Inside, the light from the kitchen lamp stretched across the floor like a path. I followed it to the workshop, flicked on the switch. The bench was still cluttered with tools, bits of wood, a half-finished picture frame I never gave my daughter. Maybe I'd still finish it. Maybe I'd leave it behind. The smell of oil and pine hit deep. It always does. I traced the outlines of my old projects, the ones that carried both pride and regret. There's a lesson in the way wood remembers every cut. You can't undo it, but you can still sand it smooth. When the clock hit midnight, I turned off the light. The moonlight caught the empty chair through the doorway, casting its shadow across the room. For a second, it looked like someone sitting there again. I didn't look away. I said softly, "I'm doing what you'd want, love. I'm not letting them sell the life we built." Outside, the lake was calm again. The world always resets if you give it till morning. But this time, when the sun rose, I wouldn't be the same man sitting at this table waiting for permission. Tomorrow I'd start packing the things worth keeping and decide where the rest should go. Because sometimes saving what you love means letting it go before someone else ruins it. The morning came in silver. Light spilled through the curtains like someone had scraped the night clean. I woke before the alarm, before the birds, before the world remembered it had a schedule. It's a habit I never lost. Years of carpentry trained my body to rise with the sound of air turning pale. The air inside the house was still cool from the night. I brewed coffee, the same battered percolator hissing softly, and leaned against the counter while it gurgled. Outside, mist rolled low across the lake, swallowing the dock till it looked like it led to nothing. That suited me fine. I took my mug out to the porch. The wood beneath me creaked the way it always had. Old but faithful. You build a thing right, it doesn't resent its age. I sat and listened. The wind, the far-off hum of a truck on the county road, the faint echo of a train, heading somewhere people hurry to be. Somewhere in that hush, I thought about the first time I laid the foundation for this house. I was 23, sunburned and proud, saving every dollar from the mill to buy lumber 1 week at a time. My wife drew the first plans on the back of an envelope, her handwriting looping and certain. "Just enough space for laughter," she'd said. We built it with those intentions. Laughter, weather, children, work. Now the laughter had thinned to memory, and the work left to do wasn't with my hands anymore. It was with my name. By 9, I'd gathered the folder, the deed, the insurance, the survey papers Ruth might need. I tucked them into an old tool bag, felt fitting. Every good job starts with the right tools. In town, the streets were slick with last night's rain. The bakery smelled of cinnamon and sugar. A boy was dragging a skateboard across the sidewalk, wheels knocking rhythm into the morning, life going on, unaware. Ruth's office door stuck a little before it opened. "Morning, Grant," she said, standing from behind her desk. She'd tied her hair up, pencil tucked through the bun. There was a map of the county on the wall, dotted with red pins. "Morning," I said, setting the folder down. "Got a couple of interested parties already. You said you wanted quiet, so I kept the listing private, word of mouth only." "Appreciate it." She flipped through the pages, her finger tracing signatures that weren't there yet. "Any hesitation?" "None worth listening to," I said. We went over the forms, offer letter template, disclosure page, notary section, each one neat, clinical, stripped of sentiment. The language of transactions, precise, bloodless. I initialed where she pointed, signed where it mattered. My name looked smaller than I remembered it being. Maybe that's what happens when you start handing pieces of yourself away. When it was done, she slid the pen aside and gave me that look people give when they want to ask more but don't. "You'll find another place?" she said finally. "Already thinking on it," I said. "Need any help?" "Not the kind you can give." She nodded, understanding. The good ones don't push. She stood, offered her hand. You're doing the right thing, Grant. Maybe. Right thing's usually the hardest kind. I left the office with a copy of the signed agreement tucked in my coat pocket. Outside, the air smelled faintly of rain and exhaust. I walked 2 blocks to the hardware store out of habit, not need, ran my fingers over the racks of nails and screws. The kid behind the counter said, "Morning, sir, you building something?" "Something like that," I said. On the way home, the sun broke through the clouds, throwing shards of light across the lake. I slowed the truck, watched the reflection shake in the water. The house sat quiet at the edge of the trees, paint faded, gutters bent, roof still. Holding strong, I'd done good work. Inside, the clock over the mantel ticked steady. I went straight to the workshop. The smell of sawdust still clung to the air, sharp and honest. I started cleaning, sweeping the floor, stacking wood, wiping down the bench. Not because it needed it, but because I did. There's peace in order. I found the old picture frame I'd started for my daughter. The corners still rough, unjoined. I finished it slowly, sanding till the edges met smooth. When it was done, I placed it on the shelf, empty, seemed appropriate. That afternoon, my daughter called. "Dad, we were thinking maybe we could bring over an interior designer this weekend just to get some ideas." I could hear him in the background, pitching enthusiasm like confetti. "That's fine," I said. "I'll make sure the place looks presentable." She sounded surprised by how agreeable I was. "Really, that's great, Dad." "Wouldn't want to embarrass the family," I said, and she laughed, unsure why the joke felt heavy. After the call, I walked through each room, taking stock, not of what I'd lose, but of what would carry forward. The rocking chair, the cedar chest, my wife's quilt folded at the foot of the bed. Things with pulse left in them. Everything else could stay. Evening came gentle, like it was apologizing for the morning. I sat on the porch again, watching the sun drop behind the trees. The air turned cool, full of crickets and the smell of wet bark. Somewhere far off, thunder murmured but didn't come closer. I thought about how people talk about legacy, how they think it's something you leave behind. Maybe it's not. Maybe legacy is what you protect from being misused. I ran my hand along the armrest of the chair, the wood smooth from years of palms resting there. "You're gonna be all right," I murmured to the house. "You'll keep standing, just not for the wrong folks." When darkness settled, I locked the front door. One turn of the key slower than usual. My heart didn't race this time. It just steadied. Decisions have a sound, a final click that tells you it's done. I climbed the stairs, the floor creaking the way it always had, each step a small echo of every version of myself that had walked it before. At the top, I paused, hand on the rail, listening to the quiet. No voices, no plans being made in the kitchen. Just the hum of a house breathing easy for now. Tomorrow I'd take one last walk around the property line. Measure the corners, count the boards. Say goodbye the way a builder should. With care, not sentiment. Then I'd be ready for Ruth's call, ready for whatever offer came first. I turned off the light, lay down and listened to the rain start again. Soft, persistent, patient. Like the world sanding itself smooth, one drop at a time. By the time the sun rose the next morning, the deal was already moving. Ruth called at 7 sharp, her voice crisp as ever. "Got an interested party," she said. "Local nonprofit that restores craftsman homes for veterans. They'll pay fair, no haggling. Wants to keep the structure original." "That's all I needed to hear," I said. She paused, the kind of pause that carries more meaning than words. "You sure you don't want your daughter looped in? It'll come as a shock." "It's meant to," I said quietly. Sometimes the only way to teach people respect is to let them feel what happens when it's gone. When the call ended, I set the phone down and stared at the kitchen wall. Morning light crawled up the plaster, tracing the uneven paint like veins. The house looked back at me, patient, forgiving. I whispered, "Just a little longer, old friend, just a few more days." I spent that day playing a role, the weak old man they thought they were managing. I let my shoulders slump, move slower than I needed to, sighed when I stood. There's an art to being underestimated. You can't oversell it, you just let them believe they're ahead. That afternoon, my daughter called again. "Dad, how are you feeling?" she asked, too soft, too careful. I said, "Oh, a little tired lately. Been forgetting things. Maybe you're right about that retirement place." Her relief was immediate. You could hear it through the line. "Really? You'd consider it?" I chuckled low. "Guess there's no harm in looking." When we hung up, I sat back in the rocker and laughed under my breath. Not out of cruelty, out of disbelief at how easy it was to become invisible when people need you to be. Later that week, they showed up with a glossy brochure from some senior community. My son-in-law did most of the talking, all cheerful manipulation. "They've got a wood shop there, Grant," he said, tapping the page. "You'd love it. You could keep busy, meet folks." "Looks nice," I said, turning the pages slowly. "But who'll look after this place while I'm gone?" He smiled too quickly. "We'd handle everything. You just focus on relaxing." Relaxing. That word again. Same as rest. Polite language for disappear. They left the brochure on the counter. When their car pulled away, I picked it up, flipped through it once, then dropped it straight into the trash. The next morning, Ruth called again. "Offer came through," she said. "They're ready to close by end of the week. Cash deal. I'll send the documents to sign tomorrow." "Good," I said. "You want me to meet you at the notary's office?" "No need. I can handle a pen." That day I spent hours in the workshop. The air was thick with the smell of pine and varnish. I polished my tools even though I wouldn't be needing them much longer. Each one had a memory. The chisel I used to carve our initials into the porch beam. The hammer my wife gave me when we first moved in. I wrapped them carefully in canvas, one by one, and laid them in a crate. In the middle of all that, my grandson stopped by. Kid's only 10, all energy and questions. He wandered through the doorway, eyes bright. "Grandpa, why's everything in boxes?" I smiled. "Just tidying up, bud. Sometimes a man's gotta make room for new things." He looked around at the shelves of wood scraps and half-finished projects. "Can I help?" "Sure," I said, handing him a sandpaper block. "Smooth out the edges on that bench for me. Always sand with the grain, never against it." He nodded, serious as a craftsman. The rhythm of sandpaper against oak filled the room. Steady, honest. For a few minutes the world felt simple again. When he finished, I ran my palm over his work, smooth as glass. "Good job," I said. He grinned. "You gonna keep this bench?" "Maybe. Or maybe I'll leave it for someone who needs to learn how to sit still." He frowned, not quite understanding, but that's all right. Someday he will. After he left, the house felt bigger, quieter. I stood in the doorway looking at the sunlight spilling across the floorboards and thought about how everything we love eventually becomes a test. Not of what we built, but whether we can let it go with grace. That night, my daughter called again. "Dad, we scheduled that tour for next Thursday, okay? Don't worry, it's just to look." "Of course," I said. "You two should come by Friday instead. I'll make dinner." "That sounds nice," she said, her voice softening. "You sure you're okay?" "Better than I've been in years." When the line went dead, I turned to the window. The lake shimmered under the moon, silver and endless. Somewhere across it, a heron lifted off, wings slow and deliberate. Freedom doesn't rush. The next morning I woke before dawn. The documents were waiting in my inbox. The sale agreement, title transfer, closing date. I printed them on the old office printer that coughed ink like a smoker. I signed each page with the same care I once used to join beams. My signature didn't tremble. Ruth called later to confirm receipt. "Everything's locked in. Funds will clear by Friday. You did it, Grant." "I know," I said. "You sound calm." "I measured twice, Ruth. I'm just cutting once." That night, thunder rolled over the lake. The storm came heavy, hard rain slapping against the windows. I stood at the porch door, watching the lightning split the sky. The house shook, not from fear, but from memory. It had weathered worse. I whispered into the noise, "You're almost free." The next morning, sunlight cut through the remnants of the storm, bright and clean. The world looked freshly sanded. I spent the day packing what mattered. A few clothes, some photographs, my wife's quilt, my toolbox, the frame my grandson sanded. The rest could stay. Houses don't keep you alive, they just remind you how to live. As evening fell, I cooked dinner. Something simple, stew and cornbread. I ate at the table alone, the same empty chair across from me. I poured a glass for her like I always do, set it beside her place. The candle flickered between us. "I'm almost done, love," I whispered. "One more nail and we're free." Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the smell of pine and lake water through the screen door. Somewhere out there, my son-in-law was probably planning his next step. Staging, pricing, decorating. He had no idea the ground beneath his ambition was already sold from under him. I smiled, a small, tired smile. Not triumph, peace. In 2 days, the papers would clear. In 3, I'd be gone. The sky that morning looked clean enough to start over. Pale blue, the kind that used to make my wife open every window in the house just to let the air move through. I did the same thing out of habit, even though there was no one left to say, "Feels good, doesn't it?" The scent of wet pine rolled in from the lake. I made coffee, poured it into the chipped mug with the faded carpentry logo. The house was almost empty now, just boxes lined neatly along the wall, everything labeled in my handwriting. Tools, photos, keepsakes. The echo of my footsteps followed me from room to room. I set the mug down and ran my hand along the kitchen counter. The wood was still smooth from where I'd refinished it years ago. My daughter once spilled red wine there, panicked, and my wife had laughed so hard she cried. You can still see the faint shadow of the stain if the light hits just right. Funny how houses remember things even when people don't. By 9, I'd put on my best shirt, the dark one with the pearly buttons, and drove into town. The road wound past the timberline, through the fog that still clung to the low hills. I kept the windows down, the air cold and sharp in my lungs. Ruth was waiting at the notary's office when I pulled up. She held a folder thick with papers, her expression calm, like someone carrying a secret they intend to keep. "Morning," she said. "Morning," I answered. "And you ready?" "I've been ready since the day they called my porch wasted space." Inside, the office smelled like copy toner and lemon polish. The notary was a quiet man with gray hair and a tie too tight at the neck. He laid out the documents one after another, each page a soft whisper when turned. Ruth nodded at the first line. "Right here, Grant." I took the pen, felt its weight. It wasn't heavy, but it carried everything. My name slid across the paper, slow, deliberate, every letter of it earned by calluses and years. When it was done, the notary stamped each page with that satisfying clunk, official, final, irreversible. Ruth gathered the stack, slipped it into her folder. "Congratulations," she said softly. "You just sold your house." I nodded. "No, I just gave it to people who'll treat it right." She smiled. "You're sure you're all right?" "I'm fine, Ruth. Never been better." Outside, the sun had burned off the fog. I stood by my truck for a long moment, letting the warmth soak in. There's something about a clean decision that feels like a full breath after years of holding it. Driving back, everything looked sharper. The shimmer on the lake, the dust floating in the sunlight, the faint crack in the mailbox post I never fixed. Small things that didn't matter anymore. When I pulled into the driveway, their car was already there, my daughter and her husband waiting on the porch with a camera bag and a tape measure. He smiled when he saw me. "Hey, Grant, we thought we'd get some photos for the Airbnb listing." "Is that right?" I said, keeping my tone even. I walked past them, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. The house smelled of fresh air and dust, empty like it was holding its breath. They followed me in, chattering about decor, lighting, online ratings. My daughter looked at me, her smile uncertain. "Dad, we didn't mean to step on any toes. We just want to make this easier for you." "I'm sure you do," I said. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the envelope Ruth had given me, official letterhead, the ink still fresh. I handed it to her. "You'll want to read that before you start taking pictures." Her husband took it from her, tore it open, eyes scanning the page. His smile collapsed one muscle at a time. "What is this?" he said. "It's a notice," I said calmly. "As of 9:30 this morning, this house belongs to the Veterans Restoration Trust. Closed, signed, and recorded with the county." He blinked, reading it again as if the words might rearrange themselves. "You sold it?" "Sure did. But you can't just—" "I could, I did." My daughter stepped forward, voice trembling. "Dad, why?" "Because you called my home an opportunity," I said. "Because you forgot it was built for living, not renting. And because sometimes a man has to decide what's worth more, money or memory." Silence filled the room, thick enough to feel. Outside, a gull cried somewhere over the lake, long and lonely. He tried again, voice rising. "You didn't even tell us. That's selfish." I turned to him, steady as stone. "Son, you plan to rent out my memories by the night. Don't talk to me about selfish." My daughter's eyes filled, but she didn't speak. She looked around the room, the bare walls, the boxes, the empty space where her mother's chair used to be, and I saw the realization settle in. She wasn't angry, just lost. I walked to the kitchen, poured myself the last cup from the pot. The coffee had gone cold, but it still tasted like clarity. "You've got until the end of the day," I said quietly. "After that, the trust starts renovations. If you need a souvenir, take one." He opened his mouth, but she caught his arm. "Let's go," she whispered. "Just let's go." They walked out together, the screen door snapping shut behind them. The sound echoed through the empty rooms like a final nail set flush into wood. I stood there a while, staring at the sunlight creeping across the floorboards. For the first time in months, the air felt light again. By noon, I'd loaded my truck. One duffel bag, a few tools, the quilt folded neatly on the passenger seat. Before I left, I took one last walk through the house. I touched the doorway where we'd marked my daughter's height in pencil, the kitchen table where my wife used to hum while chopping vegetables, the windowsill where morning light always found her first. I didn't cry. I just breathed, slow, even thankful. When I stepped outside, Ruth's car pulled up. She rolled down the window, waved. "Everything okay?" "Better than okay," I said. "It's done." She smiled. "You got somewhere to go?" "I'll find somewhere." I looked back one last time. The porch boards gleamed under the afternoon sun. The lake sparkled beyond, endless and quiet. "Goodbye, old friend," I murmured. I climbed into the truck, turned the key, and let the engine rumble to life. The tires crunched over the gravel as I pulled away, leaving behind nothing but a trail of dust and the echo of a man who'd finally reclaimed his peace. By the time the road curved out of sight, the house was already just another shape in the rearview mirror. Smaller, lighter, free. The road out of town was narrower than I remembered. Trees leaned over it from both sides, their branches meeting in the middle like two hands shaking after a long argument. The farther I drove, the more the noise of people faded. No engines, no voices, just wind through pine and the low hum of the tires on asphalt. There's a peace that comes after a clean cut. You don't notice it right away. It settles slowly like sawdust in the sunlight. Every breath felt wider, deeper, unhurried. The world had room again. I didn't have a destination, not exactly. I just followed the road east until it broke open into stretches of farmland, and the scent of rain-soaked earth filled the cab. My old truck rattled over the bridge outside Miller's Crossing, the boards thumping a familiar rhythm. I smiled to myself. Some sounds never change, even when everything else does. By dusk, I found a small cabin for rent on the edge of the bay. Nothing fancy, one-room, tin roof, screen door that whined like an old song every time it opened. Perfect. The landlady, a kind woman named Martha, didn't ask many questions. She saw the calluses on my hands and said, "You work hard. You're welcome here." That was enough. Inside, I unpacked the little I'd brought. A duffel, the quilt, my toolbox, a few photos. The cabin smelled of cedar and old books. I opened a window, let the sea air in, and for the first time in years, there was no weight on my chest. That night, I cooked eggs and toast on a single burner, ate by the window, listening to frogs singing out in the reeds. My wife would have liked it here. Simple, quiet, unbothered. I poured a small glass of whiskey, raised it toward the dark outside, and whispered, "We made it, love. Finally free." Sleep came easy, the kind that doesn't dream. Morning brought fog thick as wool. The bay was a pale ghost behind it. I took my coffee to the porch and watched the water shift under the mist. A small fishing boat drifted past, the man aboard lifting a hand in greeting. I lifted mine back. No words needed. Later that day, I walked into town. Just a handful of streets. Diner, post office, hardware store, church. Folks nodded when they passed. Not curious, just kind. I liked that. Bought a newspaper, sat at the diner counter with a plate of biscuits and gravy. The waitress asked if I was new around here. I said, "I'm just passing through." She smiled. "Aren't we all?" In the afternoon, I stopped by the docks. The sign read Henderson Boat Works, a weathered building that smelled of oil and salt. Inside, men were sanding hulls, patching paint, hammering rhythm into wood. I stood there a while, watching the muscle memory of their work. The owner, an older man with grease on his hands, noticed me. "You look like you've done this before," he said. "Used to," I replied. "Still remember which end of a hammer's which." He laughed. "You looking for hours? Wouldn't mind staying busy. Come by tomorrow morning, we'll find you something." And just like that, I had a reason to wake up early again. That night the wind picked up. The tin roof rattled and sang. I sat by the window polishing an old plane I'd brought from the workshop, its brass catching the firelight. Outside, lightning stitched silver threads across the bay. I thought about my daughter. I hadn't heard from her since that day on the porch. Maybe she was angry, maybe she was ashamed. Either way, I hoped she was safe. Some lessons take time to settle. I didn't sell the house to punish her. I did it to save something honest in a world that had started to rent out its memories. After the storm passed, I stepped outside. The air was electric, cool against my face. The moon broke through the clouds, laying a silver path across the water. I followed it with my eyes, steady, patient. A letter came 2 days later, Ruth's handwriting on the envelope. Inside was a simple note. "Deal closed smooth. The veterans group moved in today. They're naming it Mason House. I read that line twice, maybe 3 times, Mason House. I smiled. The world still had poetry left in it. A week later, I received another letter, this one from my daughter. The handwriting was smaller, hesitant. Dad, I don't know if you'll read this. I don't know where you are. But I wanted to say I understand now. I was scared. We thought we were helping, but we weren't. Listening. The house looks beautiful in the paper. They're painting it the same color Mom liked. I'm glad you chose what you did. I miss you. Please write if you can. Love, your daughter. I read it sitting on the porch steps, the sun sliding low over the bay. The paper trembled slightly in my hands, not from weakness, from gratitude. Sometimes forgiveness doesn't need to be spoken aloud. It's enough to be understood. I folded the letter, tucked it into my jacket pocket, and watched the tide come in. The water lapped at the posts below, soft and sure. A pelican dove once came up shining. When the evening cooled, I walked down to the dock, the boards warm under my feet. I sat there until the first stars came out. Thought about my wife, my daughter, my grandson, the house standing steady by the lake. All still part of the same world, just different corners of it. Peace isn't something you find. It's something you make. Like a good piece of woodwork. You shape it, sand it, polish it until it fits your hands. The night deepened around me. I breathed it in, slow and even. Somewhere in the distance, thunder grumbled again, soft as memory. I whispered into the wind, "Don't worry about me, I'm where I need to be." And for the first time in a long, long while, I believed it. The mornings on the bay settled into a kind of rhythm. I woke with the light, long before the gulls started circling the docks, and brewed coffee that smelled faintly of smoke and salt. Outside, the mist would hang low over the water until the sun started to nudge it apart. Some days I'd just stand there with the mug in my hands, letting the quiet do what years of noise couldn't. Make sense of things. At Henderson's Boat Works, they put me to sanding planks and refitting ribs on an old skiff that had seen too many winters. It was good work, clean work, the kind that leaves your hands aching and your mind calm. The younger men there started calling me Mr. G, at first out of respect, then out of habit. They didn't ask questions about where I came from, and I didn't offer stories. Out here, people care more about how steady your hammer swings than what ghosts you've brought with you. In the evenings, I'd walk the shoreline. The tide always brings back something, a shell, a piece of driftwood, a memory. I picked up the smoother pieces and carried them home. Started shaping them into small carvings, birds, hands, sometimes nothing at all, just curves that felt right. I lined them along the cabin window, little markers of days well spent. One afternoon, Martha brought over a pie. "You're looking healthier," she said, "like you finally exhaled." "Maybe I did," I said. "Maybe I'd been holding my breath for a long time." She smiled, left the pie on the table, and didn't pry further. There are folks who understand silence better than conversation. Letters came now and then. One from Ruth, short, neat handwriting letting me know that Mason House had been dedicated to 3 veterans returning from overseas. She'd sent a photo, new paint on the siding, flowers in the yard, a sign by the porch that read, "Welcome home." The old place looked proud again. Whole. Another letter came from my daughter. She said they'd moved closer to the city. Her husband had found work managing a small cafe. No more schemes. She said she hoped I was well, that the grandson missed me. She'd tucked in a drawing he'd made, a simple house by a lake, a stick figure standing beside it. Underneath, in uneven letters, he'd written Grandpa's house. I pinned that drawing to the wall above my bed. Every night I'd glance at it before the lamp went dark. There are some things worth remembering and some worth releasing. That picture was both. Work on the skiff finished by midsummer. Henderson handed me an envelope, my first pay since leaving home. "You don't have to stay if you've got somewhere better," he said. I smiled. "Not sure there's such a thing as better. Just different," he nodded. "Keep the key to the place. You've earned it." With the money, I bought a small houseboat, old but sturdy. Fixed her up over a month of quiet mornings, new boards, fresh paint, a motor that finally hummed instead of coughed. I named her the Lark. The name just felt right. When she was ready, I eased her off the dock one dawn. The bay was still, the water glass flat. The world looked new again. I steered her out until the docks were no more than dots behind me. I wasn't running anymore. I just traded one kind of stillness for another. Weeks passed like this, the sound of water against the hull, gulls calling, the steady thrum of an engine that understood patience. I started visiting the floating library boat that docked twice a week near the bay, read aloud to kids whose parents were working the wharf. It started small, one boy and a dog, then grew. By the third week, a handful of them were waiting every time I tied up the Lark. I told them stories that smelled of sawdust and rain, about how a man once built a house for love and learned what it meant to let it go. They listened, wide-eyed, not knowing they were hearing truth disguised as tale. One evening near the end of summer, a familiar car pulled up by the docks. My daughter stepped out, hair caught by the wind, eyes searching. I saw the hesitation before she spotted me by the boat. She walked down the dock slow, careful. "Hi, Dad." "Hi." For a long time, we just stood there, the sound of the bay between us. "I didn't know where to find you," she said. "I wasn't hiding," I replied. "Just not waiting to be found." She nodded. "You look good." "So do you." She glanced at the Lark, at the freshly painted sides. "You living out here?" "For now." "I came to say I'm sorry." "You already did. The letter said enough." I wanted to say it in person. I looked at her, the way her hands twisted together the same way her mother's used to when words got heavy. "You don't owe me an apology, sweetheart. You just needed to see what happens when a man remembers his worth." Her eyes shone and she stepped closer, hugging me with both arms. I felt her heart racing against my chest. For a moment, time folded in on itself. Every version of her, from the little girl with scraped knees to the woman standing there now, all at once. When she pulled back, she smiled through tears. "Do you think you'll ever come back?" "I think I'm already where I'm supposed to be," I said. She nodded. "Then I'll just visit." "I'd like that." We sat on the dock until the sun dropped behind the water, talking about small things. The grandson's school, the weather, the boat's engine. The kind of talk that doesn't fix the past, but builds a bridge over it. When she left, she waved from the road, her face lighter than it had been in years. That night I stood on the deck of the Lark, the water black and bright with reflections. A warm wind moved through the reeds, whispering secrets to the dark. I thought of my wife again, her laugh somewhere in that wind. "Guess I didn't disappear after all," I said softly. "Just changed my address." Above me the stars came out one by one. The engine ticked as it cooled, the sound small and content. I leaned against the rail, eyes on the horizon where the water met the sky, and let the world breathe around me. Somewhere out there a trumpet was playing from a boat I couldn't see, soft, slow, perfect. It drifted across the bay like a blessing. I closed my eyes, felt the rhythm settle in my chest, and smiled. Because disappearing isn't the same as being lost. Sometimes it's just the first real way of being found. If this story stayed with you, don't forget to hit that like button. It tells me these stories still matter. And before you go, tell me in the comments, what part of Grant's journey hit you the hardest? Was it the moment he let go of his house, or the moment he finally found peace by the water?